G'day community, and welcome to Triggered, Utopia's community podcast. I'm your host Benjamin. Why don't you take a seat at the bar, grab a drink, and relax. In tonight's episode, we're chatting with PersainCAT, Monarch of Divinity. Welcome, Persian.
Thanks, it's a pleasure to be here.
Okay, so before we begin our interview with Persian, I just want to say that I'll be making an announcement about the direction of the show towards the end of this video. So stick around and please feel free to contact me with any ideas. This first video will have a lot more structure than the actual podcast, but I hope you enjoy them, as I plan on making similar videos in the future. Okay, mate, so we've got a lot to get through in this first episode. Firstly, can you tell me a little bit about yourself outside of the game?
So right now, I live in Michigan in the United States. I'm actually between jobs, but I'm actually trained as a physicist. I have a bunch of undergrad degrees and a master's degree in physics.
Okay, so for the remainder of this interview, I'm going to break the show down into three segments. I'm going to call them Retro Utopia, Current Utopia, and Future Utopia. From there, I'm going to ask a series of questions regarding to that time period. All good?
Sounds good.
Okay. All right, so let's start with Retro Utopia, which is defined by me as anything before age 30, which is the Battlefield and the World of Legends merge. Okay, so you've been around the game a long time. Do you remember your first age in Utopia? And for a bonus point, do you remember the name of your first kingdom?
So I do remember my first age. My first age was actually the age Hel of Dim Forest got huge. And by a strange coincidence, I was actually in that kingdom. I randomed into it after creating an account in, I want to say, like high school or something.
Oh, that's pretty lucky.
Yeah. I mean, I didn't do anything, and I was one of the little tiny providences that just sat there kind of watching because I had no clue what was going on. But, I mean, it was an interesting thing to see someone in my kingdom just start getting huge and be like, how are you doing that? It's like, I can't get above 1,000 acres.
Yeah. So, for those of you who aren't aware, Hel of Dim Forest was this huge province a long time ago, and there's actually still a link in the Utopia Temple forums. I'll make sure I'll link it below in the comments section or something. But it got so huge, and do you remember what happened with it? I think it got gangbanged in the end or something.
Yeah, the Mental actually had a specific bug created such that if you bounced an attack, the person who received the bounce received full damage, but you only actually had to send like one unit or something.
Yeah, that's
so
right.
The whole server started bouncing her down.
Yeah. And she lost a lot of size and a lot of land, I remember. But she still was huge at one point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Still ended, I think, number one in the thing, so.
I can't remember for the life of me my first kingdom that I was in. I remember I was a halfling, that's about it. Yeah, it's a long time ago. It was like age 3 or 4, I think, but I'm not too sure. It was around that time.
Yeah.
A long time ago. Anyway, so after you joined that kingdom, I take it did you hang around in that kingdom?
No. I just kind of deleted at the end of every age and just kind of randomly created for probably, I want to say 10 ages. And so, first 10 ages were just kind of being randomly in a kingdom, not using any IRC or anything like that, just hopping around and being this is an interesting game. How come people are doing this? How come people are doing that? I ended up as a monarch at one point, and I mean, my kingdoms were kind of terrible. They didn't really chart or do anything, and I was just kind of learning the game.
So, in your first stretch of playing, what was your first age, would you say? Was it?
It was the age of Hel of Dim Forest. I want to say that was age like 8 or 9, but I'm not sure off the top of my head.
And you played for how many ages in your first stretch? About 10, would you say?
I played for 10 ages and then took a couple ages off. And then when I came back, I played solely in Genesis until it ended.
Yeah, we're going to have a chat about Genesis a little bit later on in this interview, guys. So, in the earlier ages, we're still talking about Retro Utopia. In the earlier ages of Utopia, alliances were huge. They were a huge factor in the game. And we often had 30 or more alliances, some with 20 to 30 kingdoms in them. What alliances around that time were you associated with? Let's say up to age 30, if any. And what were your dealings with them? Do you remember getting gangbanged by them? Do you remember being a part of them? Talk to me about your early ages.
The only actual kingdom that I was in that was in an alliance was Viricious, and I want to say they were KLA at the time. I
Yeah.
remember we came out of protection and fought one of the kingdoms in Lotus and just crushed them. But they mass reported our kingdom, and since back then everyone traded in, three-fourths of our kingdom was deleted for trading.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that kind of kept along of, okay, I finally got in a kingdom that looks like it could be cool, that, I saw real big a couple ages ago and has names, and then it's like, and half the kingdom's deleted, screw this, I'm not playing. And that's when I ended up switching to Genesis, because it was like the wall and the Battlefield servers were just too much for me at the time.
Yeah, it was back when everyone was getting Mewheeled, whatever it was called, getting deleted. And yeah, I think in the early ages, I think I've been in KLA. I was definitely in KLA. I remember because their forums had a real weird fucking spew green color to them. I think it was in
Yeah.
Order, and then
Yeah,
I was in Exodus for a
oh,
while.
great.
I was in Divine Wind and God's Army for a while, and I was in a few other Absalom kingdoms as well, like Fury, and Havoc, and then the Crowning Champions. Yeah, obviously, Havoc spawned from.
Yeah.
All right, so back to Retro Utopia. Can we talk to the community, or for those who aren't aware, about the difference between what was originally the world of Utopia and or the World of Legends, which later became the World of Legends, and the Battlefield servers? Do you remember what happened with those? And
So my understanding, when I first joined, there were or shortly after, there were the two servers, and you basically had to be a good kingdom to get in Battlefields. It was, I want to say, like the top few kingdoms in World of Legends got moved over to Battlefields, and then I think it was vice versa, the bottom few got moved out. So I actually never quite made it into the Battlefield server.
yeah,
I remember being like, wow, those guys must be really good, and then looking, and it's like, well, some of them are just tiny.
yeah.
It's like, what happened? I had one of the more experienced players tell me, well, they were a good kingdom in this server, but kind of absolutely got crushed.
Yeah.
So
So
it's like, yeah.
I played on both. I can't remember my World of Legends kingdoms, to be honest. I didn't play a lot on the World of Legends. I played on Battlefields mostly, but and it's not to bring World of Legends down at all, but the difference in quality from Battlefield kingdoms to World of Legends was just night and day. Like, to be back in the day, if you were, say, a top 30 Battlefield kingdom, you would crush the World of Legends server, like, phenomenally. But you're right, the top World of Legends kingdoms were rewarded or invited to play on the Battlefield server. I can't remember the exact details. I'm sure Zorpa or someone like that, when they come on, will know the exact details. But essentially, the World of Legends was like this. I don't want to say second grade, but it was. And if you did well, you got drafted to the first grade, which was like the Battlefield servers. That's essentially what it was. Now, the Genesis server, you mentioned it earlier. This was an experimental server that ran for 20 ages, I think. It allowed players on another server to play without breaking the rules of the game. Often very radical changes hit the Genesis server as a pre-trial to World of Legends. What are your memories of this Genesis server and how it affected the game?
Well, see, that's the thing. When I switched to Genesis, I played only in Genesis, so can't really speak on how it affected the main game, but I can speak to how much fun I had on Genesis. Yeah, so I remember one age I actually was able to get down to something like a 4 or 5 hour attack time while I was in college.
Yeah.
And then I remember them locking your building efficiency. So you could draft down to like 99% and you still had perfect building efficiency. And then you would attack at this insane speed. And I can remember getting in like 4 or 5 attacks before some of like the dwarves attacked because I was running Avian at the time. And then, I can remember another age where we had someone who, it might have been Jordy, but it might not have been, who just knew exactly how to abuse science and came in like, and was like, I am going to be a gold sink. For everyone in the kingdom, if we do anything, I will give gold. But all I'm doing is generating gold and running defense. You guys can do whatever else you want. And then like 3-4 days in, he just like all of a sudden was like, this massive defense and just sat there giving us so much gold and so many soldiers. And then all of a sudden went from like the current size to just being like the second largest province on the server in like 3 days because he had pumped so much science
And that,
so hard.
and that's
And
the
it was
beauty
just
of the
like,
server. That's the beauty of
yeah,
Genesis. That's why I loved it.
yeah, and it's like, I'm still playing at this time, like, I'm actually having fun. I know what's going on, but it's like, well, how did you even know to do that? Well, science is broken in the main server, and Genesis started afterwards, so I was going to abuse it. It's like, oh, see, I haven't been playing on the main server, but it was just like really fun to see the people who would come over and just completely break Genesis.
Yeah. And that's what always happened. There would be huge, large provinces with huge science or random things or huge, massive offenses or randomly high defenses that were just out of this world that could never be broken. My biggest memory about Genesis was back then when the alliances and the alliance wars and all that sort of stuff were going on. There was a little bit of spite and hate going through the community. All I remember from the Genesis server, other than playing randomly, was that when you went to Genesis, no alliances on the World of Legends or Battlefield servers mattered. You could play with whoever you wanted, and they didn't care as long as you didn't hate each other. And that's what I love. I love playing with all these random different alliance members and random kingdoms with random names. And yeah, that's my probably biggest memory of the Genesis server. And I'm disappointed it's still not around.
Yeah, me too. I remember I had to get an age where I played with Godly, and he was like, I'm going to be the best for whatever I want to be. You guys can go screw yourself. And it's like, great, way to play. It's like, I'm actually taking Genesis semi-seriously because it was the only server I played, and it was just like, I haven't quite met someone like this before. And then eventually got recruited off of Genesis into kind of the core that I still play with. So,
yeah, well, I'm sure we'll get into a godly topic on the podcast at some point in the future.
Yeah.
All right, so we're talking about servers, and so we know we had the World of Legends server and the Battlefield server. We know we had the Genesis server, but for those who are unaware, there was actually a fourth server, well, fourth, fifth, and sixth, and that was called the Great Utopian Wars. Correct me if I'm wrong, these were randomly assigned kingdom allocations that warred back to back until the last kingdom on the server stood, and I think it was 3 losses and your kingdom was eliminated.
That was definitely the second one.
The second one?
For some reason, I want to say the first one actually had no wars in.
It had no what?
Right?
I can't remember.
I don't think the first Great Utopia were actually even recorded wars. Didn't it? It actually removed acres.
I think I only played the second two. I didn't play the first one, so I don't remember it, to be honest.
Yeah, so the first one, which I came back playing in college, right as that one was ending, actually had a whole bunch of kingdoms, and everyone lost acres every day. Instead of getting your free acres, everyone lost 5 acres.
I remember
and it was
something
the last
weird
kingdom
like that.
Survived.
Yeah. All right. So the first one was called the Great Utopian Standoff, and it was based off the Age of Unity game mechanics, and that ran from the 6th of December 2005 to the 13th of May 2006, and was won by Dawn of the Samurais, the kingdom. Did you play? You played in the first one? What do you remember?
I wanted to play in the first one, but I was in college at the time and didn't see that it was happening, so missed the first one. But I read up all about it at the time.
The second one was called the Great Utopian War, and that was based off the Age of Kings, and that ran from the 26th of May 2006 to the 20th of September 2006, and was won by Great Warriors. Do you remember what kingdom you were in then?
I don't remember the name of the kingdom, but we, I think, won one war and then lost all the others.
Yeah. The third one was ironically called the Second Great Utopian War, which was based on the Age of Darkness, and that ran from the 29th of November 2007 to the 19th of March 2008, and was won by Rainbow for the win. Now, I'm not going to put my hand on my heart, but I'm pretty sure Cheese ran that kingdom, and I think I would play there for like a week and was just so inactive on it that I got kicked, but I can't remember. But I'm pretty sure Cheese ran that kingdom Rainbow. But anyway.
It's very possible. I actually created accounts on that just specifically to give to someone. Yeah. Because I figured I played in the first one and they traded in a whole bunch, but they didn't trade in enough. So in the second one, it's like, okay, I'm having fun playing on the other one. I don't need another server. College is kind of stressful, so I'll just create an account in Providence and give it to someone. Yeah. So.
I never finished an Age of one of those, the Utopian Wars, but they were an interesting way to create another server and bring a different dynamic into the game. And I think if the game ever got big again, that'd be something that they might think about again, hopefully, because it was a lot of fun. I remember that.
Yeah.
So the last thing I want to talk to you about in Retro Utopia is a topic I want to talk to, and I think I want to run this topic to every single guest I speak to from Retro Utopia. Happiness. Okay, so
Yeah.
happiness. It was a mechanic that was thankfully removed a long time ago. Many current players have no idea what it is. What do you remember about happiness?
So I remember happiness, but I don't remember all the little ins and outs. I just remember my Providence always being unhappy. I could not do anything over and over to get my Providence to be happy. And unhappiness had horrible negatives to it.
Oh,
You got
hardcore.
really unhappy. It just completely messed up your Providence. And I just remember, like, for the life of me, I could not get that to balance and actually have a military where I could still fight.
Yeah. I remember. Yeah, I just remember if you did like minuscule things to your province differently each day, you'd come back the next morning and you're either riding in the streets ready to kill everybody, or they're happy as Larry. And I honestly don't know where the happy medium was, and I think nobody ever really did.
Yeah, that was probably the worst mechanic they put in.
Yeah,
honestly.
All right, so current Utopia, which I define as age 30 until now, so until then the last age, or this age, whatever. Talk to me about your Kingdom Divinity. Specifically, when were they created?
So Divinity was actually formed in age 48, 49. There was a merger in the mid 48, and then the kingdom actually started to take hold back in age 49.
Okay. In that entire time that you've been around, you've never been associated with any allies or alliances? You've been an individual warring kingdom the whole time, or most of the time?
Well, when Divinity was founded, the founder was a guy named Lama, and he was a member of Hodge. And so Divinity was actually founded as a Hodge kingdom, and then maybe 5 or 6 ages in, we wanted to do stuff. They said no, so we quit. And so since maybe 3 or 4 ages in, we've just been a solo war kingdom. We've had a lot of friends, but no hard alliances.
Yeah, no, that's fine. And are you ever, the burning question that you probably get asked a lot, are you ever going to go for the land charts in? Because I've seen you up there a couple of times, relatively successful, and I feel like you can hold your own up there, but for some reason you guys do it for one age every 10 ages, and that's about it.
Well, see, the goal of the kingdom is to have fun. Above all, we want to have fun. And to that end, we have a few players that I don't want to say are bad, but aren't really people that you can just go have fun and come back in a day or two and will keep up with everyone. So, the need to micromanage some of those players and the balancing, okay, well, I don't want to just harp on some of my players and be like, you're bad, you're behind, build up, and constantly get them online. So, every once in a while we're like, okay, we've been warring, well, let's, go big, see what happens, understand that you're going to be harped on a little bit, but it's only going to be an age, so if it's stressful, you'll be fine.
Yeah, no, we understand that, but I think, as I've played a lot of time in the land charts, it's disappointing we don't see many kingdoms. Like, there's normally only 1 or 2 these days, and a lot of warring kingdoms. So it's I'd love to see you guys up there every now and then. All right, so next question, and I just want to read out a quick statement here. I want to talk about the recruiting tool. I don't want to specifically ask you a question about it. I just want to talk to those who are unaware about it. So the recruiting tool, and forgive me if I'm wrong at any point here, but the recruiting tool is a tool used in-game mostly for smaller kingdoms. I'm going to say it gets used for all kingdoms, but mostly smaller kingdoms, because the bigger kingdoms generally recruit over the forums or IRC with friends and stuff. So it gives the option to give the monarchs to send out a request for a player. So it will send out a request in-game, and once that request is being sent out, that player, that monarch can request either obviously attacker, thief, or mage. Have you actually? I will ask you a question. Have you used it, and do you think it's a good tool? Just a quick answer. Do you think it works?
Well, I know I have players who have created ghetto kingdoms, and they've used it a lot, and they've gotten a lot of players. But my kingdom had actually only ever invited either over the forums or via friends.
Yeah. So I guess I can probably speak on this because I've just created a ghetto kingdom this year, this age. But so I used it when I first created my kingdom and took control, and I put out a request, and I think within 24 hours I had 4 players willing to join, and that's pretty good. I mean, I wasn't asking a lot, but as a ghetto kingdom or a smaller kingdom, everyone needs to be aware that there's a recruiting tool for the Monarch, and it does work. So get in there, put your requests out, try and get those players in. We'll try and teach the younger players how to play the game. All right, so the current Utopian meta is a 24-hour protection period. Do you think it's the right amount of time? And if not, what do you think fits the game and why?
Well, I really liked the 72-hour period because it allowed you to get your military trained up, get your sizes ready, and kind of come out swinging. But since they added actually all the credits and all that kind of stuff, I actually kind of like the 24-hour period. I think that gives just the right amount of time to, okay, well, we're going to explore and be a little bit bigger, or we're going to really attack kingdoms. And I think that just kind of speeds it up, because the biggest thing I find that actually hurts the game is this days and days of nothing. If you get one player that only logged in, say, once over the first 72 hours, you're going to have an entire kingdom waiting on 1 or 2 players who were missing.
Yeah, I understand that. I think I feel like 24 hours is just too small for me. I think 36 to 48 would be better, probably 48, but that's thinking probably from a different point from where you are in a smaller kingdom as opposed to a bigger one in general. I think 48 would be good, but that's just my opinion.
One of the really nice things about 24 hours, too, which my kingdom did twice, but can't do anymore, is back when there was the old science, where you actually had to buy books using money. We actually wouldn't train. We released everything other than 100 thieves on every province, and put everything we had into guard stations and what's now universities. And sat there pumping max science and just letting kingdoms attack us. So we'd have 1 to 2 people who had just offense, no military, and we would just let kingdoms who honestly were bad just attack us as we accumulated science. So couple ages in a row, we ended up getting our first win against kingdoms that, kind of shouldn't have touched us.
Yeah, so I baited them in, basically.
And while that's not exactly the right way to foster fun for the guys we just smashed into the ground, it ended up getting us a nice base of science and a nice honor base.
That's what we call baiting ghettos.
Yeah. Well, and every age we did it, it worked. So
and every age the ghettos fall for it.
Yeah.
So just be aware of that. All right.
So the 24-hour protection really lends itself well to that, which...
Yeah, no doubt. We were briefly talking about smaller kingdoms as opposed to ghettos. I'm not trying to be rude. So smaller kingdoms as opposed to a bit larger ones or bigger ones. Yeah. So in current Utopia, there's a major difference between the land, honor, and war wins charts. Basically, as the goals of different kingdoms vary, how do we find a unified goal? And to be honest, is there any real reason? Palin has talked about in the forums the overall chart or whatever it is. I think that's massively flawed. Is there a way we can find a common goal where we can bring Utopia back together? Or is it just honestly just 2 different games now? Is it large and small?
Well, I think in general you have the smaller people just aren't as good. We've gone big, we've been small, and it's nothing against some of those smaller kingdoms, but they just aren't as good. They aren't as coordinated. They don't have as many tools. And when you try and force them to compete with better kingdoms, they're just going to get hit down over and over again. Now, I'm sure there's ways to kind of tweak it, like the land win from the war win is a really nice system early to get some of those kingdoms fighting each other, but it still ends up being the kingdom that then ends up beating the worst kingdom gets a massive advantage. And we could change it such that some of those small kingdoms actually, instead of getting like 5,000 acres, got bumped up to a percent of the largest kingdom in the game. Like, if you win a war, you're automatically 75% of the largest kingdom in the game, no matter what. Yeah. You could do things like that, but that's just going to encourage those small kingdoms to get beat down over and over again. I think what the ultimate goal needs to be is those really big kingdoms just need to that are competing for land just need to either keep competing for land or burn out a little bit and go have fun in the war win chart. I don't think there's anything wrong with there being this natural separation, because we fought some really good, honestly, ghettos, but it's like they never would quite compete with a kingdom like CR or Emirati or any of those really good kingdoms.
Yeah, look, I agree. I've fought a lot of smaller kingdoms, and I've lost to smaller kingdoms, which I honestly didn't think we'd lose to. And even when I was in CR, we lost to some kingdoms we probably shouldn't have lost to. But I think the difference between in that situation is if you're going to put the house on, if they're going to fight 10 times, you put the house on, say, a more established, more well-run kingdom winning 9 times out of 10, and maybe the smaller kingdom jumping them up. But I think you're right. Maybe it's the bigger kingdoms need to come down. I mean, is there even a point? I don't know.
Well, the bigger kingdoms have come down too, and that's what's nice. They do come down every
do.
once in a while.
So why don't the smaller ones come up once in a while?
Exactly.
I'm just joking. Talking about the smaller and the bigger kingdoms, and now there's a difference in monarchs in smaller and bigger kingdoms. There are a real lack of actual capable monarchs in the game, which is no offense to anybody, but would you agree with the statement that, on the other hand, there's also a lack of reliable core players out there, forcing the top monarchs to sort of get together for continuity, to get in the same kingdom like CR did and what AMA did and what Beast Blood does and all those sorts of things? Would you say that there's also some sort of responsibility on just the normal player on stepping up his activity and stopping having to rely on the monarch so much? Would you agree with that?
I do agree with that. I think the biggest thing about the monarchs is the need to micromanage their players. And if you have a kingdom like Beastblood, for example, where every player basically could lead the kingdom, you don't need that micromanagement, and it actually makes leading it not the worst thing in the world. And when you take some of those smaller kingdoms where it's like, well, we don't have enough leaders. Well, if every player was as good as your leader, you really only need that one leader doing everything.
Absolutely. And that's the big thing. Being able to rely, I think the bigger kingdoms being able to rely on their players, just using their initiative alone, is probably the difference as to why they want to group together in general. So, I don't know, just keep that in mind when everybody's saying all the monarchs are jumping in the same kingdom. Well, the monarchs are getting a bit tired of having to babysit every province as well, so maybe step your game up and we'll go from there. I plan on having an in-depth chat to Zorpa about the science system in the future, but what are your thoughts on the way it is currently, how it works? And I honestly have no idea. I'm Ghetto Monarch, but I haven't really spent much time, and I plan on spending time and getting Zorpa or you to explain it to me, so let's go.
So the old science system was, a great concept, but it just didn't work that when you were bigger, you got so much science that it was unfeasible to war anyone small. I took a spy on science of one of my players from like 3 years ago, who was chained from like 5,000 acres to 500. And he had something like 400% pop science, 300% BE, and 1,200% magic science.
Yeah.
And that was just, when you get that much science, there's no way someone with just basic science can really compete with the province that's getting chained that has that much science. Yeah. Now, I had suggested and thought that it would be better to, instead of buying books, was to buy BPA, books per acre, so that you didn't really get an advantage from being bigger. And that's kind of what they've gone to now, in that you just get a piece of science and that affects your science.
Yeah.
But the thing that I don't really like is that there's caps.
Which is frustrating.
The need to cap science, cap each category, means that at most, the most magic science I can ever get is like 150%. And we oftentimes in the past simply won because all our mystics had 300% magic science. They had no pop science, no alchemy, no anything, but they could cast on anyone.
Yeah.
And that ability to kind of tweak a little bit more, I thought, made the game a little bit more dynamic and a little bit more fun.
Yeah.
So
it's almost like, especially for certain players who go for science, once you've reached the goals, they've just reached it for the end of the age. They can't really do anything else or much else more in that area, which is a bit frustrating. I think people like to push the limits, or at least be able to push them a bit further than what they currently are.
Yeah, the current science, this age, I already have 7 players at max science.
There you go.
So, to think it's not even year 3 and a third of my kingdom basically already has max science, it's like, okay, well, what do they do for the rest of the age now? They don't need to attack for science.
So let's talk about intel for a second here. How important would you say it is for kingdoms to grasp intel tools such as Monk, Lucid Bot, or StingerNet? in order to become successful. In their own categories, whether that's war, winds, honor, land, whatever. But do you think it's a required thing, or is it just an enhancer?
Well, I've seen some ghettos who my players have gone and created and just kind of they didn't use anything and they did really well. They got like 3 or 4 wins out of 6 or 7, so they have 50% win ratio and they had a lot of fun. So I don't think these tools are really needed to keep the game fun, but if you really want to start competing with the best kingdoms, I think just the analytics that these tools provide and the visual data that you can get seeing, okay, well, 5 people can do this, 5 people can do that. These are the people who are generating money. I think if you don't have that, you're never going to actually compete with the kingdoms who do.
Yeah, and it just makes things faster and easier, essentially. That's the bottom line. So, the last question on current Utopia. In your opinion, what are the biggest problems the Utopia faces? And if able, how do we go about fixing them?
So, in my opinion, it's the biggest issues end up being player retention and the fact that there's other games that are just honestly more fun. More fun, easier to play, and that's just the curse of being a text-based game. And that actually goes into the future of Utopia for myself is like, okay, how do you actually address the 2 biggest issues that are going in this game? For player retention, I see it as a natural progression of this game requires time and commitment. And a lot of people just don't have the time and don't have the ability to commit to a game that for 3 months is going to be every day. I think the adding and subtracting the hours is a huge, huge plus because half my players will end up using plus or minus an hour during a war. I mean, it might not be every attack, but they're going to be adjusting their attacks. And I would love to see that even get to the point where you say, this is the time I want my army in. Let games be based on that. Not that I have to plus or minus 1. Because there's a couple players in my kingdom that they get a 15-minute break every 2 hours. Well, if their army comes in 5 minutes after the break or 5 minutes before the break, they're simply not going to be able to hit because their job says, I can't be there. So if they were actually able to specify an exact time, it would actually require a little less sitting for them.
Something I actually hadn't thought of, but that would actually be amazing because then everybody could sync up their armies and their breaks and whenever they can hit.
And then barracks instead of being a speed buff end up effectively being a gains buff. If you have a ton of racks but you're plussing your hours, you're getting slightly more gains than you would normally. And that seems like a nice way. Like personally, I wish they would reintroduce fog and fog, that's with your attack time. Yeah. But I wish they would introduce it as a gains buff or minus. If you have fog, it's a 20% less gains when you attack someone. It's like there's a perfect example of taking the old mechanic that didn't work, but just repurposing it. That would be, personally, a nice change to the game.
I think fog in general was a great idea. I don't know why it was removed. I thought it was added another element and added a little bit more power to mystics and stuff and to attacking with mystic support.
Yeah, well, the reason it got removed is for the same reason they have plus or minus hours. Look, fog, oh crap, now it's 2 hours later and I can't attack until I get home from work. Which I think that's the right concept to remove, but you just need to adapt a little bit to keep the concepts better. Like the same thing goes for, okay, well, it's a text-based game. Okay, well, what other things would a text-based game do well on? It's like cell phones are really good, maybe Facebook tie in somehow more than just a Facebook login. I mean, there's a whole bunch of these things where you could get players, but I'm not sure exactly like where to start because that's not really my area of expertise.
Well, talking about Facebook, because you just mentioned then, I want to talk about communications in Utopia, current communications. What do you think the future is in that? Do you think ISA, for instance, will be around for a long time, forever? Do you think Facebook, Slack, in-game chat, what does your kingdom do, first of all, and what do you think works the best?
Well, my kingdom uses a mix of WhatsApp and IRC. We still are officially an IRC-based kingdom, and 24 of our 25 players log into IRC on basically a daily basis. I have one player who's completely cell phone based, but his brother plays in the kingdom and they text each other a lot. So I kind of let that player slide. I honestly think the concept of how IRC works is going to need to be integrated in. The way Monk integrates it via his bot is a great addition,
It's a step in the
But
right direction, but it's not complete.
yeah, but exactly, it's not complete. There needs to be something a little bit more. Like how, for example, Discord is a chat for voice and text, and it kind of works the same way as IRC. But again, exactly how to implement that in and actually make it so it feels natural, I think once that's done, that'll probably bring maybe not a great deal of players, but I bet another 5-10% players would rejoin if all that stuff was natural.
Yeah, I agree, and that links in with my next question here, which is, we hear of these mass emails being sent out every couple of ages. It's a step in the right direction, no doubt. But how do we get the word out more? How do we get word out about Utopian? How do we actually get it to continue on? I know people are saying it's in decline, it's going to die. Look, it's still continuing, but how do we get it bigger? We need to grow it. How do we do this?
Yeah, I mean, advertising, I think, would be a great step, but they've said multiple times we don't have the money to advertise. We don't have the player base to spend thousands of dollars to get maybe another 5% of players, another 10% of players. I honestly think that if you took some initial way to make these newer players easier, I don't know, just give them an easier introduction to the game, and then had a bunch of these tools just in the game so they could be like, oh, look, this is how much I would get if I attack, or this is how much money he has. Oh, look, I want to steal money, and just make that naturally a little bit easier. That in addition to just the timing of, okay, this is when I want my army in, you would naturally see a little bit of growth. And then if you get a little bit of growth, then maybe you start advertising. But until they really introduce something like Monkbot naturally in the game, I don't think you're going to get a lot of new players.
Look, I agree. I think individual players can do their part. Like, there's no one stopping anybody promoting the game out on Facebook or on forums or on Reddit or whatever, any sort of social media platform. There's no one's stopping any player doing that. Okay, so in regards to the old races that are gone, do you remember which ones are gone? And do you remember, would you like to see any of them back? And if so, why?
So gnomes and dark elves instantly jump to mind.
Yeah.
And I personally was never a huge fan of gnomes. I always thought halfling just made more sense.
Yeah.
It's like, if you're going to talk about a thief, the gnome to me seems eh. And I was never a huge fan of that. They seemed kind of interchangeable, and I preferred halfling. Dark elves, thematic there, whatever the word is. But dark elves seem like they would be a nice introduction to be brought back, and kind of, instead of being a mage attacker, be an attacker mage more. Yeah. And it would be nice to see them back, but at some point I'm not sure how to balance the number of races we have versus how complex the game gets. Because I can remember some of the competitors, one of them had something like 20 races and 40 personalities, and I can remember going to play that game just as a break from Utopia and being like, okay, I have no clue where to even start. There's just too much stuff.
Yeah.
So Dark Elves, I could see Dark Elves replacing like I don't know, say Undead for an age or two, and I wouldn't be against them maybe rotating some of those things in and out.
Or just going to throw this out there. Let's bring the Dark Elves back for, say, 2 or 3 ages and put Undead back as they're supposed to be, so when you die, you come back as Undead, and let's just roll the dice and see how we go with that one. Do you remember that?
Yeah, I do remember that.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be against that at all.
Yeah, for those who are unaware, when you used to die in Utopia, like get killed, your province, 0 land, you're out, peasant kill, whatever, you come back as an undead, and that's how the undead race originally spawned from. You'd come back as an undead, so that's how they were created in the game.
I think that'd be a fun mechanic.
Yeah. So my final question in this interview is, back on the alliances, if you saw player numbers increase, would you encourage alliances to come back in the game? I know it's a big topic, and I know the new players don't like talking about it, but the old players do, and I'm an old player, so I'm going to talk about it. Would you like to see alliances back in the game if the numbers, say, doubled or tripled?
I mean, for me personally, I don't like the concept of somebody that I'm just friends with screwed up. Now I have to take my entire kingdom of 25 people and force them to do something stupid, to attack into war, to waste a month or a couple weeks of just, these two people have an issue, now we have to come in and solve it.
Yeah, I get it.
Now, so I can see where, okay, well, alliances, whatever, but I just, that concept, I don't really like of being tied to have to do that. Yeah. And that's, to me more of what alliance is you're honor bound of, you're in this alliance, you have to follow the head alliance dude. I'm more of a fan of, I've got 30 friends and of other leaders, and I'm getting horribly screwed over by someone. Is anyone willing to help? It's like, okay, well, you're my friend. Let's look at the merits of your situation. Sure, I'll help. And that's more of informal alliances. Now, I personally like that, but I think if the player base doubled or tripled again, you would definitely see those hard alliances for the top. You just naturally, you're going to be more successful if you're two kingdoms going against one kingdom than one kingdom going against two. So those alliances are just going to exist. And I don't think it's naturally a bad thing. I think it's going to depend on who the leader is. I've seen, like, KLA way back when was really friendly and really nice, and they didn't do anything. Some of the more recent alliances in the past age or two that weren't really called alliances, but still kind of allied together, they're not always as forthcoming about what they're willing to do. And I think that kind of isn't as good. If you're going to actually be an alliance and not just some friends, just go ahead and do it. I think it's healthy to the game to be obvious of, these people are going to help each other no matter what.
Wow, that's it, mate. That's my last question. I appreciate you stopping by and having a chat. Just for everybody who's listening, is Divinity recruiting at the moment?
We have one open spot right now, but it's being sat by one of our other players. So if anybody would like to approach us for the open spot, we would definitely listen.
No worries. All right, thanks again for stopping by, mate. The chat went for a bit longer than I thought, but that's all good. And I hope to have the video up later on tonight. And thanks again.
Cool. I'm happy to help. Yep. Sorry it went a little longer than you were expecting.
It's all good, mate. Thanks heaps. See you later.
Yep. Cheers.
Okay, community, just wanted to make a quick couple of announcements about the show. Firstly, the podcast itself is going to be co-hosted by Zorpa and Kygo. That podcast is going to be bi-weekly to begin with. We'll increase that if it gets more popular. However, at this stage, Zorpa's away on his honeymoon. Once he gets back, I'll send out a rundown sheet to Zorpa and to Kygo, and we'll sort the podcast from there. So the show's going to be new. You need to give us a bit of time to work it all out. Like I said earlier in the video, I'm going to be conducting a series of short videos on different topics such as monarchs, core members, old, new, kingdom highlights, exposés, recruitment notices, and those sorts of things. At a later date, we might look to add some ads, but we'll wait to see if it gets popular. I hope it does. If it does have any ad revenue, we'll put that back into the game for some game promotion or something like that. We'll work that out with Bishop. The channel art will be updated soon to mention Zap and Kygo. When I originally created the podcast, it was just me doing it, but they've joined since then, so we'll work it out from there, and I'll put up the new artwork as it comes in. Last point I want to make is I'm looking for content creators of all sorts, so if you're interested in helping out the show, please drop by Triggered on the new turnout, and let's have a chat. There's no requirements to talk if you're not keen, but any sort of help would be great. Okay, that's it from me, community. Hope you enjoyed the first installment of Triggered. The podcast is coming soon, I promise. In the meantime, wait out for the small videos. And just a quick last note. Unfortunately, we ran out of time this episode of Triggered. We're going to have to bump Proteus to the next episode. Stay safe, Utopia. Talk again soon.
We moving smooth, we moving fast. You're tuned in to Trigger Utopias podcast. We moving smooth, we moving fast. You're tuned in to Trigger Utopias podcast. It's the Trigger Utopias podcast. We coming at you smooth and we moving real fast. Attacking, defending, you know how we do. It's the gaming podcast set up just for you. We moving smooth, we moving fast. You're tuned in to Trigger Utopias podcast.